Hey, everybody. I'm Dr. Tom Ingegno, doctor of acupuncture and Chinese medicine. About a year ago, I got to give a lecture to the Department of Defense's hospital system. That is through Walter Reed, and they've had me a few times. And it was October. I figured it was a great time to show them how weird I was. And I threw out 7 different topics. The last one being this one. I called it eerie medicine or spooky treatments. And it was an attempt to kind of bring some of the old stuff to modern day and look at modern day treatments and their historical roots, as well as kind of go a little bit out there into all this stuff that we know in medicine. How odd is it? Where does it really come from? And what are those crazy roots that sound like modern day stuff? And just a bunch of random thoughts. And the head doctor there called my bluff. He said, yeah, let's do that one. That one sounds fun. And I was really just trying to weird him out and say, do you know what kind of a lunatic you're getting? But they ate it up. So, it's 3 days before Halloween. Hopefully I'll be able to get this up on YouTube tonight, so it's not too late. But let's talk a little bit about eerie medicine. What I'm going to say is if you have genuine questions or comments, please write them in the comment section in YouTube or reach out to me. If you're going to be a jerk, probably not. Anyway, let's move on. So a little bit about me. I've been an acupuncturist for over 23 years. They make you do a little bio slide here. My full CV is available online. It's long but dreadfully boring. I much prefer to interact with people like this, even if it's only a one-way conversation, but at least you can see me and hear my expression and that kind of thing. So basically, I was kicking around this idea that everything old is new again. And I had read a couple of books and I was looking into some philosophical concepts, and it really kind of hit me hard. And over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see some things that we're going to go over in just a couple. But let's kind of keep it moving because I don't want to do a whole hour-long Q&A here. The Ebers Papyrus is one of the oldest medical texts. It dates back to ancient Egypt. It's about 1515 CE, so before zero. And, we constantly think that we're kind of at this apex of medicine. Even back then, they knew exactly how to graft skin back on a nose that had been torn off, right? So we do it now with facial reconstruction, but they even knew that the vasculature across the bridge of the nose here, right at the eyebrow, had to stay attached. So what they would do is graft the skin off the forehead, flip it over, and attach it that way. And they even made a template for the cartilage in the nose. So this is thousands of years old. I learned about this through writing a cupping book, and where they mentioned cupping therapy right alongside of this. So it's an amazing text, and it has almost line by line for that nose reconstruction what we would do in modern day hospitals. So it's kind of amazing that we think, oh my God, we've never been so intelligent. Certainly we've never had this kind of technology before, but we've been humans with human brains as long as we've been called humans. And we were able to problem solve. Maybe we're a little too stuck in front of a screen, which is ironic that I'm telling you this and you're watching it on a screen. I get that. So a few things that also kind of hit. This phrase over here on the left, I have a giant scroll in the back of my clinic. It's front and center down the hallway. It's the first thing you see when you start walking down the hallway. You read it from right to left, top to bottom, right to left, top to bottom. And it says Isha Hanbun Yuta Hanbun. So it's Japanese. It's an Okinawan expression. It says half doctor, half shaman. When we make that more colloquial English, it's when you're dealing with a problem, seek both the advice of a doctor and a shaman, right? I want to look at that, and that's kind of where East Asian medicine lives, right? We don't just say it's the body. We don't just say it's the spirit. It's not just emotional. It's not just physical. It's a little bit of everything. And East Asian medicine as a whole really tries to embrace that concept. I also started looking more into medical anthropology because I do think there's been a lot of traditional therapies that, because they looked too spiritual, they were a little too out there, they kind of got pushed to the wayside. And there is definitely clinical value there. And there's emotional value there for people too, especially, we look at the placebo as a bad thing, but playing that up, getting people to believe something, we can actually help them feel better with that. So I'm not against that, but medical anthropology is a study of how health and illness are shaped, experienced, and understood in the context of cultural, historical, and political forces, right? So back pain here may not look like back pain somewhere else. And certainly throughout history, it might have affected people differently. And that's a hard concept because, I know what pain feels like. Yeah, but how does it affect your life? And that's different when your life was something else in a different part of the world, a different culture, a different time. So medical anthropology is kind of cool where we do look back and we look at things through those lenses and say, oh, this is why they were doing that. We can see how they got there given their belief systems, right? And that's kind of interesting. And this book on the right here, I have to just mention it because it kind of cooked me a little bit, right? Todd Murphy is a professor up in Canada. This book, Sacred Pathways, the Brain's Role in Religious and Mystical Experiences. It took me a while to read this. It is chock full of research. It is written at a dissertation level, and it's written by somebody that studied neuroscience. And he actually, I don't know if he coined the term neurotheology, but reading this book is the first time I heard that. Neurotheology is basically how the brain interprets mystical and religious experiences. So he goes in to talk and make a compelling argument about reincarnation as an evolutionary trait in humans. Talks about it, or he talks about ESP, extrasensory perceptions, as part of our psychology, rather than through the trimmings and, traps of, say, like New Age kind of concepts. Certainly a great read. He also has a device called the Shiva system, which stimulates your brain through electromagnetic waves and can induce altered states of consciousness and spiritual experiences. So one of these days I might actually pull the trigger on that and buy that because it's so interesting to me personally. So let's start where medicine probably has its roots. Witch doctor, shaman, witches, strega, bruja. I give you the Italian and the Spanish, and then grandma's medicine, right? The first people to be the healers were either the village healer or someone in your family. They often performed what they would call spiritual healings. That means they might have given you some herb or something, but the practice may have been laying of hands. It might have had incantations or chanting or music. And all of that has a real function on how your brain perceives your illness, which can actually help you get better in some cases. They also performed a lot of manual therapies. That would be massage, cupping is one of those old ones. Acupuncture, scraping, moxibustion, which is an herb that we burn on the surface of the skin in our clinics. That used to be folk medicine as well. And those people in the village took care of other people, right? When Buddhism rose, acupuncture kind of migrated with Buddhism. So as it went from India to China, it picked up acupuncture. So those monks were doing acupuncture. It migrated to then Korea and then Japan. And a lot of hospitals, the first hospitals in Asia, were set up outside of temples, and those priests became doctors. All right. If you notice, I misspelled the word there, so I'm going to change the slide real quick on you. Now, one other thing that I thought was super interesting, and this kind of hit around the time that I was planning this article. You can see August 28th, 2023. Quantum physicists did this experiment, right? We talk about where they separated two subatomic particles that both had a directional spin and were bonded. They knew that when they switched the direction of one, instantaneously, the other conformed to that, right? No time loss, even when those subatomic particles weren't next to each other. Well, they imaged these with some kind of electron microscope. And it looks like what most people would know as a yin-yang, right? So Taoist, we would call it a Tai Chi properly. That's its technical name. But this is what comes up under electron microscope when we talk about particle entanglement here. These are two photons specifically. But within all that, it's super amazing because there's no way Taoists going back 5, 6, 7,000 years knew that that image was two photons intertwined. So where did it come from, right? I have no answer there. It's just something that is too crazy to say, oh, that's dumb luck. And once again, this is all on that theme of everything old is new again, right? So let's get into the treatments because I only got a few minutes and then I got to jump onto another thing. The spooky treatment lineup. We're going to start on the left here. Biotherapeutics. That is anything that stings, bites, or has venom that we use therapeutically. Human placenta and its relationship to stem cells. Then we're going to get real disgusting and talk about fecal transplants and its historical predecessors. And then I'll tell you a little story about witches and psychedelics. Oh my God, I misspelled psychedelics too. Let's move on. So bugs is medicine, right? Traditionally, bee sting therapy, maggot therapy, leeches were classically used, right? Sometimes to an extent that was detrimental, but their theories were right. Here on the left is a bunch of PubMed articles on the modern day uses of these classical treatments. We know that maggot therapy is being used for necrotic tissue debridement. It's doing quite a wonderful job. It only eats the dead tissue to clean out a wound. We know that bee venom has like 500 different compounds. There's actually some research that shows it disrupts HIV. So it kills, quote unquote, kills the virus. Leech therapy can be used to break up blood clots. And it can also be used post-surgical to keep blood flowing so that tissue stays alive and reconnects and heals up nicely. Traditional applications. The Chinese have been using not only leeches over here on the left to break up blood stasis and keep blood moving, but it's been used in Jewish medicine too. That's a clickable link. I don't know exactly where that goes. If you ask, I will find that for you. And then other things in the Chinese materia medica. I showed the bat here. There are at least 5 different excrements that we use in Chinese medicine, all for similar issues. Yes, they're clean. Now they're harvested and they're normally heated, so nothing's living on them before we give them to people. And they're not used that often. We've opted for other things. I'll give you a hint. This picture on the top right here comes from a movie about a gladiator. All right, take a second to guess. But in this scene, he's just picked up by slave traders after suffering some wounds and getting the crap kicked out of him. And one of the fellow slaves packs his wound with maggots and then packs it so it can granulate up after it. But this isn't pretty much kind of how they would have done it back in the day. And then this book over here, Dr. Amber Rose is an amazing person. She's a psychotherapist, a social worker, an acupuncturist, and an Emmy Award-winning opera songwriter of all things. She wrote a book on apitherapy, that's apitherapy, bee sting therapy, and specifically combining it with acupuncture, which in her course of study, she learned that they've been doing it in China for thousands of years. I've had the pleasure of writing the foreword for her second book. She's an amazing woman. I don't know how much she's teaching, but if you're into that, you can look at her up and hopefully find her, and she's super willing to answer questions. So stem cells, right? This has been a buzz term or a therapy for a little while now. Everything from PRP, platelet-rich plasma, stem cells, and exosomes are one of these futures of functional medicine, or should I say regenerative medicine. We know that stem cells are undifferentiated tissue. A scientist named Waddington talked about a landscape, a hill, where as these cells differentiate, they roll down the hill till they become their end tissue. If we can push that tissue back up that hill, we can turn it back into stem cells and allow it to redifferentiate to repair tissue. This is some great stuff. There is tons of research going on in this field, but where did it come from? human placenta. Now, the Chinese have had a human placenta in their materia medica for a long time, and it comes from observation of mammals, other mammals having the mother that just gave birth eat the placenta. Now, if you look over here on the right, this comes from one of our the Chinese materia medica book that we all study from in school. There are so many hormones and compounds that are in human placenta that the body needs, especially when a woman has just given childbirth, lost blood, strained herself. We say they lost essence, right? That kind of ages them a little bit. This helps put that back in. Well, along that, you see there's hemoglobin in there. There's also stem cells that are coming along that cord blood and into that placenta. So up there on the right used to be a way that we as Chinese medicine or East Asian medicine practitioners could purchase human placenta that's been dried, and we would cook that in a formula. That is no longer available in the U.S. We do know that people who have just given childbirth can request their placenta, and then that can be processed into Chinese herbs for them specifically. Gwyneth Paltrow was not first with that. She probably just made a little bit more noise than everybody else. That's what celebrities can do. But this is a great way for women to rebuild themselves after pregnancy, especially heavy laboring or some kind of birth trauma within that. This can help them recover from that a little bit quicker. We do this now. We can extract stem cells from the cord blood, and actually a lot of new parents actually bank that, right? They get a kit before the woman gives birth, and they'll take that blood and they'll put it into a cryogenic freeze and save it in case the baby or one of the parents needs it, because it has to be more genetically linked to whoever it comes from. But this is great stuff going back thousands of years. And today we're now on this cutting edge with all the stem cell therapy that we're doing. Fecal transplantation, right? So over here on the left, you can definitely look at this and Google those, and those will probably take you both to PubMed, right? And we can see the current evidence in delivery and therapeutic uses of fecal microbiota transplantation actually reviews all the research and talks about the different ways that fecal transplant can actually help people. One of the things that I learned about with a Hopkins doctor whose daughter was actually autistic, she flew out and did fecal transplant. I forget which hospital she flew to, but her daughter went from nonverbal to verbal shortly after the fecal transplant, because we know how much the microbiome affects brain function. We know prebiotics, probiotics, and the specific flora that are alive in there can power our immune system as well. So there is a definite link there, and it's something that I think people should explore, even though it sounds gross. Now, how gross does it sound? Well, let's talk about where it came from. I was most impressed. You can Google this too, the history of fecal transplant. It is available on PubMed. It's a review of just where everything came from. I had heard that a famous physician, Ge Hong, had something called the soiled underpants treatment. What was crazy to me was that this history of fecal transplant actually references Ge Hong from 1700 years ago. However, they referred to it as yellow soup, which I think is probably historically accurate as well. Basically, in a time where if you had diarrhea, there was a very good chance you would dehydrate and die. So this was very serious. This was before antibiotics as we know them today. What he noticed is that some people in villages where, whatever was causing the diarrhea was running rampant, didn't have it. And what he did was collect their underwear, boil them into a soup, and give them to sick people. And this might be the earliest known accounts of this technique being used. It sounds super gross. Today, they use the highest quality poop and put it in a capsule, and you swallow it and try not to think about it. But then this article also mentions that, camel stool was used by German soldiers to treat dysentery in World War II, which is also kind of interesting. Camels being ruminants, they digest a lot of plant material. Their gut biome is probably very strong. And taking that would be another way to introduce bacteria that might stop you from getting, from literally crapping yourself to death. The kittens on the right are a palate cleanser because I thought about this about as much as I want to. And I've talked about this twice now, and it's not any easier for me. So let's move on. So let's talk about witch's ointment. First, I'm going to talk about Hua Tuo. I put him in the middle here. But Hua Tuo is another famous Chinese physician. And on top of doing some incredible things surgically, they made up a whole story about him doing a double heart transplant. Whether or not that happened, that's highly unlikely. But he was known to be one of the first people to make an anesthesia. Ma Fei San is what it was called. Ma is the word for cannabis in China. So marijuana, cannabis, whatever you want to call it. But he also mixed it with another herb called datura. Now, datura here in the West is called devil's trumpet. It is a psychedelic, but it's a psychedelic, not a safe one. Also, belladonna is another one where we know that the alkaloids that give people the trip are wildly unstable and pretty toxic. The problem with these types of psychedelics, specifically the belladonna and the datura, belladonna is also known as devil's cherries, to tell you how serious they are, is that those alkaloids from plant to plant and even from flower and fruit on the same plant are wildly different in strength. So a little gives you a trip, a lot messes up your kidneys and your liver and sets you into a grave. Not a fun time. Kids, stick to psychedelics that don't kill anybody. But witches, so the people that had the traditional herbal knowledge in the areas, knew this, right? They knew of the volatility of these alkaloids specifically. They probably didn't say that like that. They knew these plants were pretty toxic and not exactly safe. They also knew that if it crossed a membrane rather than got ingested, it was less toxic. So what they would do is make an ointment. And datura was one of these ingredients in there. And they would put it on a broomstick. Now, witches would straddle the broomstick and fly. I'm going to leave it up to you as adults to decide what vascular tissue those psychedelics were being absorbed through. But this is why we say witches fly on broomsticks. There's also a reason why reindeers fly and Santa flies, but we'll get to that maybe in December. So I just love that story. And here's a nice, cute, original Bewitched cartoon, just so we keep it nice and light here. Now, that was it. If you made it along with me, I went a lot quicker with this one. Because I did prepare this as an hour-long lecture with Q&A. But I love doing this stuff. If you found something interesting in this, please reach out, leave a comment. If you have any follow-up questions or just want to connect with me, that's my hi, hello, which is, how to connect with me everywhere. You can reach out to the clinic. I love coming out and lecturing. I love helping people set up clinics. Or, if you have any events that you'd like me to come out and be part of, I'm more than happy to do that. So please keep in touch. Like I said, if you're just going to spam me with hate comments or something, I'm just going to ignore or block you. You're not going to get my time. But anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you so much. And I hope you have a happy Halloween. Take care.